You believe the thoughts in your head are yours. You believe you chose them. You did not. Most of what you call your own mind was placed there. By repetition. By the people around you. By voices you stopped noticing years ago. And the most unsettling part is this. You cannot feel it happening. There is no sensation of being influenced. The installed thought feels exactly like a thought you authored. That is not a flaw in the system. That is the system working perfectly. Think of a strong opinion you hold, something you would defend. Now ask a harder question. Where did it actually come from? Not the reasons you give now. The reasons came later. Where did the opinion itself begin? For almost everything you believe, you will not be able to answer. It was simply there one day, and you assumed it was you. Try it with something smaller, a preference you would call simply yours. The kind of person you find attractive, the food you cannot stand, the political reflex that fires before you have heard the full sentence, the voice in your head that narrates your failures in a tone you would never use on someone you loved. None of those arrived with a receipt. You cannot point to the moment you decided them. They were absorbed, repeated, and installed so early and so often that they fused with your sense of self. And anything fused with your sense of self becomes invisible. You do not examine it. You defend it. What the Kybalion stated as its first principle, and what William Walker Atkinson spent his life documenting, will make you look back at your own convictions, your fears, your tastes, your reactions, and recognize how few of them you ever chose. Not metaphorically, precisely. There are people who are difficult to manipulate. You have met them. They are not smarter. They are not colder. They simply learn to notice the moment a thought is being placed into them instead of arising from them. You have not been taught that difference. Almost no one has. This is the principle of mentalism, and the law of suggestion that operates beneath it. 7 movements. By the end, you will not hear your own thoughts the same way again. As we go, watch for the one that has been running you the longest. 1. The Kybalion opens with a single statement. The all is mind. The universe is mental. Strip away the cosmic language, and here is what it means for you. Everything you experience is processed as a mental impression before you ever act on it. You do not respond to the world. You respond to the impression of the world that forms inside you, and impressions can be shaped. Whoever shapes the impression shapes the response. This is not a theory about the stars. It is a description of the doorway through which everything reaches you, and that doorway has almost no guard. Consider what this means in practice. You did not choose the language you think in. You did not choose the assumptions buried beneath it. You did not choose the 1,000 quiet definitions of normal, of success, of failure, of love, that you absorbed before you were old enough to question anything. By the time you could think for yourself, the framework you were thinking with had already been built by other people. You were handed a lens and told it was your own eyes. 2. Here is the mechanism Atkinson identified, and it is the center of everything. The subconscious does not argue. It does not evaluate. It does not check whether a suggestion is true before it accepts it. It receives, like soil receives a seed. The soil does not ask whether the seed is good for it. It simply grows what is planted. Your subconscious works the same way. A thought repeated often enough, with enough emotion from a source you trust, is accepted as fact. Not because it is true, because it was repeated. You did not consent. You were not asked. The impression went in through a door that does not lock, and repetition is the key that turns the lock. A single suggestion rarely takes, but a thing said to you 1,000 times by people you trusted in a tone that left no room to argue does not need your agreement. It only needs frequency. This is why a lie you heard often feels truer than a fact you heard once. Truth was never the requirement. Repetition was. The subconscious counts. It does not weigh. 3. Recall how a fear of yours began, not a fear you reasoned your way into, one that was simply handed to you. A parent who flinched at money. A teacher who made you small in front of others. A culture that told you, 1,000 quiet times, what kind of person you were allowed to be. You did not decide to carry those. They were impressed on you before you had any defense. And here is what makes it worse. You have spent your adult life defending impressions you never chose as if they were your own conclusions. The opinion feels like reasoning. It is memory wearing the mask of reasoning. This is operating in you right now. The thing you are most certain about is often the thing you examined least, because it never felt like something to examine. It felt like you. Look at the larger pattern. By your age, the impressions have had decades to harden. The belief about how much a person like you is allowed to have. The belief about whether it is too late to begin. The belief about what you must simply accept. The quiet sentence that plays when you reach for something larger. Who do you think you are? You did not write that sentence. Someone said it to you once, or 100 times, and the soil kept it. And here is the part that should stop you. You have likely passed the same impressions on. To your children. To the people who trust you. The fear that was planted in you, you planted again, without ever meaning to. Because installed impressions do not stay still. They reproduce. The thoughts you never examined do not end with you. Stop for one moment before the next movement. If this is naming something you have sensed for years but never had the words for, subscribe. Not for entertainment, for continuity. At your age, with the time you have left, the wrong impressions are expensive and learning to see them is rare. Press subscribe and press like, so this reaches another person who has been carrying borrowed thoughts and calling them their own. And leave one line below. Not all of these thoughts are mine. Not as a slogan. As the first honest thing said about a mind you assumed you owned. 4. Now, the part almost no one considers. Suggestion does not only come from words. Atkinson called it the mental atmosphere. Every person carries one. A mood, a frequency, a pressure. And you absorb it the moment you enter the room. You have felt this. You walked in calm and left agitated, and nothing was said. You spent an hour with someone and carried their heaviness for the rest of the day. You were not weak. You were receptive. The subconscious does not only accept spoken suggestion, it accepts the unspoken state of everyone around you. So ask yourself honestly, whose atmosphere have you been living inside? Whose mood became your baseline? Whose fear became the air you breathe? For most people, the answer is not their own. They are broadcasting someone else's signal and calling it their personality. Trace it back honestly. The home you grew up in had an atmosphere, and you absorbed it before you could speak. If the air was anxious, you learned anxiety as a resting state. If the air was scarce and tense, you learned to brace against life. That became your baseline, and you have called it your temperament ever since. Then you grew older, and walked into new atmospheres, and absorbed those too. A marriage has a climate. A workplace has a pressure. The stream of voices you consume every night has a temperature, and it is rarely calm. You sit inside that current for hours, then wonder why your own inner weather feels like a storm you did not start. You did not start it. You have been standing in someone else's rain and blaming yourself for being wet. And the closest relationships carry the strongest suggestion because trust removes your last defense. The people who love you plant impressions deeper than any stranger could, often without meaning to, often passing on what was planted in them. The limit your parent believed about themselves became a sentence they said to you, which became a ceiling you have lived under, which you never traced back to its origin because it arrived wrapped in love. Suggestion does not have to be hostile to control you. The gentlest hand leaves the deepest impression. 5. Now follow the logic to where it leads. If suggestion is always operating, then the only question that matters is who is doing the suggesting. Right now, something is. The voices you consume each day, the people whose approval you track, the images that pass through your attention 10,000 times a year. None of it is neutral. All of it is planting. The advertiser knows this law. The institution knows this law. The person who wants something from you knows this law, even if they could not name it. They are not asking your permission. They are repeating and repeating and waiting for the soil to do what soil does. And here is the turn. This law is not your prison. It is the most powerful tool you will ever hold the moment you stop being only its target and become its source. The same door that let everything in can be used deliberately. That is what Atkinson called autosuggestion, not affirmations whispered without belief, the deliberate, repeated, emotionally charged planting of what you actually choose into the same soil that has been growing other people's seeds for decades. Consider the sheer volume. You receive more deliberate suggestion in a single day than your grandparents received in a month. Every screen is a planning machine, repeating, shaping what you fear, what you want, what you believe you lack. None of it announces itself as suggestion. It arrives as news, as entertainment, as connection, and the soil does what soil always does. Most people lose this quietly, not because they were weak, but because they never showed up to the contest. They let the loudest outside voice win every single day, then wondered why their inner life sounded exactly like the things they consumed. And planning deliberately is not complicated, though it is rarely done. It is repetition, with emotion, from a source you trust. And the most trusted source you have is your own voice, used on purpose. Choose the impression you actually want to live from. Return to it daily, with feeling, not as a wish, but as a fact already true. Refuse to repeat the ones you did not choose. Starve the old seed of the attention that keeps it alive. The soil does not change because you understood it. It changes because you finally decided what to plant, and showed up to plant it more often than the world shows up to plant its own. 6. But understand what this costs, because this is where most people stop. To install something new, you first have to face what is already planted. And what is already planted is not a few bad ideas. It is most of who you think you are. Your reactions, your limits, the ceiling you assume you have, the story about what you are and are not capable of. Most of it was suggested, absorbed, and rehearsed until it became automatic. Reclaiming the mechanism means watching your own certainties and asking, again and again, is this mine, or was it placed? That is uncomfortable. It means some of your strongest beliefs will not survive the question. It means the version of you built from inherited impressions has to become quiet so a deliberate one can grow. That is not a small adjustment. It is the slow dismantling of an identity you did not author but have defended your entire life. And there is a quieter cost no one names. Some of these impressions kept you safe. The fear that made you small also made you careful. The belief that you could not also meant you never had to risk and fail. Letting them go means stepping into an exposure you have avoided for decades. This is why the installed self fights so hard. It is not only false, it is comfortable. It has organized your whole life around its limits, and dismantling it means rebuilding in the open, without the old walls. Most people, faced with that, choose the walls. They would rather keep a borrowed mind that feels safe than build an authored one that feels exposed. You are not choosing between effort and ease. You are choosing between a self you inherited and a self you author. One is familiar. Only one is yours. 7. And now the deepest illusion of all, the feeling that you decided. You believe you weigh your options and choose freely. But watch yourself closely, just once, and you will see the order is reversed. The impulse arrives first, the impulse that was installed, and only afterward does the reasoning appear, neatly, persuasively, to explain a decision that was already made. You did not reason your way to the choice. You felt the installed pull, and your mind built a case for it. This is why people with completely contradictory beliefs are all equally certain they reasoned their way there. They did not. They each received different impressions and constructed different justifications. The certainty is identical. Only the seed was different. Sit with how far this reaches, the job you took, the person you married or did not, the risks you avoided, the dreams you quietly retired, how many were chosen and how many were the installed impulse, followed by a reason that made it sound like a choice. This is not meant to fill you with regret. The past ran on impressions you could not yet see. You are not equipped. You are equipped now. And from here, every reaction you catch before it moves you is a piece of authorship returned to your own hands. Once you see this, you stop being so impressed by your own conviction, and you start asking the only question that returns any control to you. Before I act on this, where did this actually come from? So here is the question that cannot be avoided. If most of your mind was installed, then waiting to feel like yourself before you change anything is waiting for an impression to give you permission. It will not. The installed self does not want to be examined. It will call the examination unnecessary. It will call it overthinking. It will tell you that you already know who you are. That voice is not protecting you. That voice is the suggestion, defending its place in the soil. You do not change when you feel ready. Readiness is just the old impression telling you to stay. You change the moment you are willing to treat your own thoughts as evidence to be questioned rather than truths to be obeyed. This does not mean distrusting everything. A mind that rejects every impression is as controlled as one that accepts every impression. It has simply been trained to react instead of receive. The goal is not suspicion. The goal is the pause. The half second between the impression and the response, where a person who owns their mind asks the one question the controlled person never asks. Let us be honest about what usually happens now. Most people who hear this will feel it land, will feel something loosen, and then tomorrow they will defend the same borrowed opinions with the same borrowed certainty. They will keep absorbing every atmosphere they walk into. They will keep mistaking the loudest impression for their own voice. And 10 years from now, they will still be running a mind that was mostly written by other people, convinced the whole time it was theirs. That is not you, not now. Because you no longer have the excuse of not knowing. You know the universe reaches you as a mental impression, and the impression can be shaped. You know the subconscious accepts what is repeated without asking whether it is true. You know your strongest fears and opinions were often planted, not chosen. You know you absorb the atmosphere of everyone around you. You know that whoever controls the suggestion controls the output, and that you can become the source instead of the target. And you know that the feeling of having decided is usually a story told after the impulse already moved you. You know that the people closest to you planted the deepest impressions, and that love was the reason you never questioned them. You know that more is being planted in you every day than in any generation before yours. You know that you cannot close the door, but you can finally stand at it. None of this makes you powerless. It is the opposite. The person who cannot be controlled is not the one who resists everything. It is the one who can finally tell the difference between a thought that arose and a thought that was placed. That difference is the whole of your freedom. Not freedom from influence, that does not exist. Freedom to see the influence as it arrives and decide, for once, whether to let it in. A guarded door is not a closed door. It is a door with someone finally standing at it. For most of your life, no one was there. So, this week, in one ordinary moment, catch a single strong reaction as it happens, and before you act, ask where it came from. Just once. Completely. And watch how much of what you call yourself goes quiet under that one question. Because in the end, most people spend their whole lives defending a mind they never wrote. The few who wake up do not become harder, or colder, or paranoid. They simply stop confusing what was installed in them with who they actually are. And until that line is seen, you are not thinking. You are repeating.